Madam Speaker, an attitude of gratitude is always important in life, and especially for us members of Parliament who depend on the support and cooperation of so many in the public sector and in the political arena. I thank them all, including the clerk and staff of the Houses of Parliament and my political colleagues inside and outside of this chamber and on both sides of the aisle. In particular, the Leader of Opposition, who is a firm, fair and wise guide. To you, Madam Speaker, for your kind words for me always, and your thoughtful guidance of the affairs of this House. I also thank the people of Western St. Andrew for their continued love and support. I'm grateful, Madam Speaker, for the continued support of my councillors, Councillor Hazel Anderson, Byron Clark, Norman Perry, caretaker Michelle Thomas, and members of the constituency executive, some of whom are here today. I thank my office staff, Ms. Jennifer Edwards and Cassie Campbell, for their yeoman efforts in making the office work for the people of Western St. Andrew, along with my assistant, Mr. Mario Wallace. I acknowledge, Madam Speaker, as well, the support of my driver and my CPO. I should not forget my long-serving secretary, Ms. Roxanne Brown, as well. Last but not by no means least, Madam Speaker, my family. Madam Speaker, it is not possible to do the job of representation well without the support of family. I want to thank my wife, Judith, who is here, and my daughter, Nile, who is not. She told me she chose violin practice than being here today. I would also like to recognize, Madam Speaker, my special guest this afternoon, the Archmandrite of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in Jamaica, newly arrived from Ethiopia, Abba Samuel Tedela. Madam Speaker, this 23-24 sectoral debate is extremely important, coming as it does towards the tail end of the COVID-19 pandemic and amidst the search for sustainable development and growth, not just to restore the status quo ante, but to open new pathways to economic development and growth. My presentation will, therefore, open some new windows which we must do to achieve our full potential as an economy with great advantages by virtue of our geographical location, as well as air and maritime advantages, among others. My presentation, Madam Speaker, is titled Surviving to Thriving, a Time for New Directions. Because, Madam Speaker, we need not convince ourselves anymore of Jamaica's potential, but must now urgently actualize these potentials to achieve greater levels of prosperity that we can see and feel for our people. Certainly, the time has come for Jamaica to become a major player in global trade, providing a more resilient and sustainable global supply chain. And the Minister of Tourism spoke eloquently to the need in the tourism sector. To accomplish our goals, Madam Speaker, we will need to transform our production structures by implementing a mix of innovative policy measures, efficient organization structures, trained and certified human resources, and a rapid technological deployment. I start, Madam Speaker, by recognizing the catalytic role of an entrepreneurial public sector in driving growth and development in the national economy. Madam Speaker, I begin my presentation by reminding this Honourable House of the catalytic role of an entrepreneurial public sector in driving growth and sustainable development in the national economy. We are all aware that the public sector has a crucial institutional role in policy making, implementation and monitoring, and that the quality of human resources is a key factor to successful policy and program in planning, design and implementation. However, it is important to note that public sector innovators, who we must be trying to retain in any reform process, do not innovate or function optimally in a vacuum. They operate most effectively and efficiently in a structured organizational environment that includes government's respect for people, good human resources management practices, leadership with integrity, good stewardship, and excellence. These are the hallmarks of creating an effective and productive public sector, Madam Speaker, that embraces innovation and strive for a positive contribution towards sustainable economic growth and development. Madam Speaker, the available economic data indicate that the economy experienced what I call a snapback effect in the post-pandemic recovery, putting us to where economic performance was just prior to the shock of COVID-19. If, however, the levelling off in future growth projected in the national economy to be about 1.1% is to be avoided, the important role of an entrepreneurial public sector cannot be overstated. Effective leadership, Madam Speaker, must engender a highly motivated and appropriately incentivized public sector to play a key role in Jamaica's nation-building journey, to overcome the challenges of post-COVID-19 and ensuring that Jamaica not merely survives, but thrives. In today's fast-changing world, with new technologies and forms of disruption posed by climate events, the country must have a functionally equipped and tech-savvy public service that can work in an increasingly complex and multifaceted environment. This requires a purpose-driven public service that continuously reviews and improves the way it works while effectively working with citizens and stakeholders to co-create new and bold solutions. The reform public service, Madam Speaker, we envision must also be inclusive, embracing a results-oriented environment, and takes its decision on a risk-based model which uses data that provide leading indicators instead of lagging indicators in the policy-making process. Madam Speaker, this will require a commitment to ongoing education, training and upskilling or reskilling to ensure that public officers have the skills and knowledge necessary to navigate an increasingly complex environment. It also requires working together in a spirit of openness, honesty and transparency, which encourages engagement, collaboration and respectful communication. Unfortunately, the current rush by the administration and forceful implementation of a complex process has resulted in many signed agreements but uncertain outcomes. As the clarity of what has been signed by the representatives of the various groups become clearer, as reflected in their new pay packages, a sense of betrayal and deep disappointment with the government has set in. The longer-term implications are concerning. The pronouncement by several of the groups, including the education sector, shows an unfinished process marked by an absence of meaningful consultation and transparency in the negotiations, and a lack of respect for and treatment of the workers. The threatened response is the mass exodus from the public sector of some key personnel with critical institutional knowledge, innovative thinkers, and dedicated persons who are no longer willing to remain in the sector due to the lack of respect, caring, and deceit. This will have far-reaching impact on the government's ability to play its institutional role, Madam Speaker. The compensation review process was a major opportunity for the government to create the conditions for a high-performance public sector capable of transitioning Jamaica from surviving to thriving by achieving sustainably high rates of economic growth and development yet to be experienced. Instead, Madam Speaker, the mishandling of the compensation review has reaped deep mistrust by almost every bargaining group, in spite of the hundreds of billions of dollars spent in the process. Madam Speaker, good governance demands exploration of the various ways in which to build and to engender trust in public administration. Public trust, Madam Speaker, leads to greater compliance with a wide range of public policies. It also nurtures popular participation, strengthens social cohesion, and builds institutional legitimacy. In the longer term, trust is needed to help government tackle long-term and difficult societal challenges, such as fighting inflation, managing climate change, navigating changing geopolitical environment, responding to post-COVID shifts in supply chains and global trade, as well as changing labour markets. Madam Speaker, successive administrations have aimed at reducing bureaucracy and increasing productivity in the public sector. Yet the current effort in seeking to accomplish the objective has failed miserably, both in the management of the process and in its suboptimal outcome. Madam Speaker, there is no reward for tackling a difficult task poorly and making matters worse for the intended beneficiaries. There's no reward. The promise made by the government at the outset of the process that no public sector worker would be worse off at the end has simply not materialized. So, judged even by its own yardstick, the effort is a failure. Concerning the urgent tasks of engendering sustained development and high growth rates in the economy, to address social inequities, crime and poor health outcomes, the state of uncertainty and simmering resentment which now exist at the end of the compensation review cannot be the hoped for or anticipated outcome of the crucial reform exercise. Madam Speaker, a new PNP administration will seek to rectify the resulting inequities and anomalies created by this failed process. Created by this failed process. Time come for a new direction. Madam Speaker, I turn next to a key leadership role for the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, for which I'm the Shadow Minister. Madam Speaker, it is concerning that the leadership of the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce exemplifies the style of engagement by the public sector workers showcased by the administration, and which has resulted in the general malaise and disruption in key agencies affecting the nation's supply chain, including Customs and Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency, PICA. The ministry itself has been the subject of major experimentation with the joining of the critical agricultural portfolio for a short period, to be followed by several ministerial changes, 4 so far, and portfolio subjects shifting. Each leadership change, Madam Speaker, has brought about its own internal shifts and changes of personnel at the board and operational levels in the several key agencies and departments in this important ministry, in which certainty of policy direction is of utmost importance for entrepreneurs and investors alike. Madam Speaker, the existing situation is not an improvement on what existed before. In fact, things have gotten worse. Since the incumbent minister took the reign of the ministry just over a year ago, several personnel changes have taken place at senior levels. Many of the heads of key agencies have either left or otherwise demitted office at great cost to the taxpayers for settlements, or have separated or have been threatened with separation under controversial circumstances. To put it mildly, Madam Speaker, the state of affairs at the ministry, department and agency is a mess.
That's an understatement.
A few of these disputes have made headlines in the news recently, Madam Speaker, one of which I find particularly disturbing, as it demonstrates a callous disregard for the seminal contribution made by the agency head and unfair treatment by the board of a head of agency who has made an acknowledged stellar contribution to nation building. Madam Speaker, I refer to the case of the head of the Jamaica Business Development Corporation, JBDC, a critical support agency for de-risking of the micro, small and medium-sized enterprise sector in the economy, who has served for over 40 years in the public service, including the last 22 years as CEO of the agency. Notwithstanding the board and CEO having agreed a 2-year contract extension previously, the board chairman reportedly called an emergency board meeting for the purpose of rescinding the contract and instead offered a reduced 1-year contract. A standoff still exists between the CEO and the agency boards, as the CEO was not paid for nearly 5 months. It was only after the intervention of an expert labor relations practitioner and an expose in the media that she was paid. Questions certainly arise, and answers should be provided in the appropriate forum, and these include: 1, was the chairman instructed to change the board's decision to grant the CEO a 2-year extension to the CEO's contract? And if so, by whom? 2, why has this matter been so protracted? And has the minister himself intervened and caused a settlement of the matter? Madam Speaker, this and other similar actions of threats, against
members, I have warned about these sotto voce comments that are passing. and
Thank you,
I'm
ma'am.
dead serious. Please,
Thank you,
I
Madam
ask
Speaker.
you to be careful what you say across, just in case it comes to the Speaker's ears.
Madam Speaker,
And yes,
this and other such similar actions of threats against senior level staff is having a debilitating effect on staff morale, both within the ministry and agencies. The minister must act now to bring order to the current situation and to refocus the work of this critical ministry, its departments and agencies, on its critical mission to foster growth and development at the enterprise level and across industries. To do this, however, the situation of several acting agency heads and transitional boards, best described as bringing Hollywood to the ministry and its agencies, for the number of acting personnel in various positions, must be quickly addressed in the interest of good governance. Madam Speaker, I next address the need for a coherent policy framework and action within the ministry and government for driving development and growth. Madam Speaker, perhaps the most glaring and consequential outcome of the apparent lack of sound and innovative leadership by the administration after more than 7 years in office is the acknowledged mishandling of the fledgling cannabis industry.
Wow.
Many have long thought, Madam Speaker, many have long thought of marijuana as Jamaica's most resilient agro-industrial crop, with the potential for developing a strong industrial base for growth and development of the economy, with widespread scientific, medicinal, and nutraceutical benefits. Jamaica's pioneering role among developing countries in decriminalizing marijuana and the establishment of a framework for the medical and nutraceutical industry, as well as its sacramental use by the Rastafari community, was bequeathed by the previous PNP administration. And Madam Speaker, credit must be given to the Leader of Opposition. He led that process, and could have been it still needs to be a success. The Minister's recent attempt at defending the importation from Canada of large quantities of cannabis, ostensibly for research purposes, and in breach of planned quarantine rules, was a source of outrage by Jamaicans everywhere. The matter rightly earned the Minister a public rebuke from the Prime Minister right here in this House. Madam Speaker, continuing, there has been much talk by the Minister since then, but as my grandmother taught me by saying, son, no listen to no noise, watch the seal. Madam Speaker, this incident is yet another example of the failure of policy guidance from the ministry to a key regulatory body under its jurisdiction, with potentially devastating outcome for the country's growth and development opportunities. This incident, Madam Speaker, is no different either in its importance or potential negative consequence for the country's economy and reputation among trading nations than another publicized incident. Madam Speaker, it is also known that several other critical agencies are even at this moment facing management or board level disruptions. I'm advised that some 18 such boards and or senior level management personnel have been or are being changed for other than their lack of performance. The situation of Exim Bank is just the latest in the string of displaced personnel in a one-year period. This is highly unusual, Madam Speaker, for such wide-scale disruption to be occurring within the ministry and its agencies outside of a change of administration. The opposition will continue its oversight of activities of the ministry and its agencies and will report on the need as it arises. Not even a party shop could be run in this way, Madam Speaker, much less a ministry of this critical importance to the health and performance of the country's enterprises and its economic growth prospects. Time come for a new direction. Madam Speaker, how does the opposition propose that we realize economic growth and development in the post-COVID-19 period, getting beyond recovery and survival to thriving? Madam Speaker, a little over 3 years ago, Jamaica and the rest of the world was being alerted to the deadly effects of COVID-19 pandemic, and the advisories from the World Health Organization provided daily guidance to governments around the world on the measures to be undertaken to avoid the spread of the virus. But all essential services, people and goods were ordered to stay in place and movements severely restricted for close to 2 years. Governments and their populations were in an unprecedented crisis as the survival of businesses across all industries and entire population was at best uncertain. Madam Speaker, the pandemic achieved what many of us had struggled to communicate to the Jamaican population for nearly 8 years previously, about the existence of a global supply chain and a method of transporting and storing goods, data, money, and people across borders, termed global logistics. Jamaica and much of the world, Madam Speaker, had finally awoken to the reality that such an ecosystem and an industry indeed existed, and although imperceptible to most, it was real. Everyday commodities and services, once taken for granted, were suddenly unavailable, or at least not available in their accustomed quantities. Stores and supermarkets globally were running short on essential supplies. Tempers flared as the struggle for basic food and sanitary items intensified. The once unknown supply chain, Madam Speaker, of which we now speak, was broken, and the effects felt everywhere around the world. The medication and the personal protective gears necessary to save lives and to provide protection to healthcare workers and critically ill patients were short in supplies, if available at all. The world was in turmoil. But as the pandemic eased, Madam Speaker, and things began returning to normal, flights resuming, and the closed hospitality sector and factories began reopening, then came the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and war had again broken out in Europe. Madam Speaker, the unthinkable had happened. Further disruption in the global supply of food and fuel sourced from the two countries at war had suddenly become short or unavailable. And even if they were available in whatever limited quantities, the prices had increased dramatically. The supply chains were either disrupted, this time by geopolitics and the imposition of sanctions against Russia. And the further break in the supply chain has led to a global inflationary spiral. The Minister of Tourism recognized that and spoke to that. Madam Speaker, governments the world over were in a fight to control inflation. Further damage to the global and local economy is being done by the measures imposed by governments to fight inflation. The most vulnerable in our society are paying the cost of these measures. Madam Speaker, as previously mentioned, nearly a decade earlier, there was a specific proposal for Jamaica becoming a logistic hub and the fourth node in the global trading system, joining Singapore, Dubai, and Rotterdam. This was initiated by the PNP government and heavily promoted. Like the other three existing hubs, Jamaica's geostrategic location in the center of the Americas, with an estimated market of over 800 million persons, and within a 4-hour flight radius to major population centers, provides an unmatched opportunity to host a major logistics and trade hub. The opportunity for Jamaica, Madam Speaker, to contribute strategically to the redesign of a more flexible and resilient supply chain, thereby achieving this objective in becoming a global logistic hub, demands urgent action. Madam Speaker, in order for Jamaica to realize its objective, a mix of integrated policies, improvement in physical and digital infrastructure, as well as focused attention in developing our human resource capacity across key industries and institutions, must be targeted. Importantly, the effort must be sustained for at least the next 10 to 15 years. Developing a logistics-centered economy must involve the whole of government. This includes an entrepreneurial public sector, with critical support from the private sector groups, representing both large enterprises and small and medium-sized enterprises, academia, as well as local and foreign investments. The good news is, Madam Speaker, that at last the government, opposition, and the private sector groups are fully aligned on the urgent need to develop Jamaica's capability to become the global logistic gateway for the Americas and to become that fourth node in the global trading system. This is evidenced by work already done by the last PNP-led government in commissioning the Global Logistic Hub Initiative Master Plan and Market Analysis. The study was accepted by the current administration in 2017 and tabled in this Honourable House. Unfortunately, no public debate on this crucial document ever took place. The plan to expand the Port of Kingston and the Kingston Container Terminal was with the grant of a concession to the French shipping line CMA CGM, was wisely supported by the incoming administration. And more recently, the Cayman Special Economic Zone was re-announced as a project to be pursued by the government. Madam Speaker, I commend the government for continuing these plans for the country, the economy, and the people will benefit. Importantly, Madam Speaker, the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority, or JESIZA, had been implemented, and the Special Economic Zone Act, piloted by me in the House, was brought into effect by the current government as key pillars in attracting investments in the development of the supply chain and logistics sector, as well as the business process outsourcing sector. The success of the BPO sector, Madam Speaker, during and after the pandemic has proved the importance of the sector. However, its sustainability is being challenged by rapid developments in Industry 4.0 technologies, including artificial intelligence, or AI. Madam Speaker, recently I was invited to participate in a forum put on by the private sector organization of Jamaica, titled, "Let's Get Serious with the Logistics-Centered Economy." This came as a first in the series of President's Forum, initiated by the new president of the PSOJ. The panel discussants included representatives of the business sector, themselves engaged in supply chain and logistics operations, the regulatory organization JESIZA, and the legal fraternity. The panel discussants confirmed the viability and urgency of implementing the Global Logistic Hub Initiative. Madam Speaker, given this alignment of support by the opposition, the government, and the private sector for the full development of a global logistics hub in Jamaica, it would be unwise for the government acting unilaterally to undertake sweeping changes in the SEZ Act without appropriate and meaningful consultation with the opposition and the country's economic partners. That would not be a wise thing to do, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the key takeaway from the pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war is not only that disruption can happen, but that it is inevitable and that building resilience is mandatory if we want to live or we want to thrive rather than simply survive in this emerging global economy. Madam Speaker, the prerequisite for experiencing transformational growth and development in the Jamaican economy in the post-COVID period are the following. 1, successfully reforming the public sector to create an energized, technologically equipped and entrepreneurial organization which is performance-driven, highly productive, and appropriately remunerated. 2, a consensus on the vision and mission of Jamaica becoming a major global logistics and trade hub in the Americas. And 3, the need to formulate a mix of forward-looking policies, programs, and projects in the public and private sectors, which builds flexibility and resilience at both country and enterprise levels to drive sustained growth and development in the economy. Having addressed the first 2 prerequisites earlier in my presentation, I now turn to the final of the 3 prerequisites. Madam Speaker, a PNP administration will seek to build a resilient, flexible, and sustainable high-growth economy by encouraging private sector participation. How should we do this, Madam Speaker? In order to achieve the high level of coordination between the public and private sector groups to realize the logistic hub in the shortest time possible, the PNP administration will replace the failed Economic Growth Council with a Logistics Council, which is focused, goal-oriented, and designed to achieve high levels of coordination among the key stakeholders. By collaborating with key stakeholders, including logistics service providers, shippers, carriers, ports and terminal operators, freight forwarders, custom brokers, as well as manufacturers and exporters, small businesses, academia, and government institutions, the Logistics Council will help to improve the competitiveness and performance of local suppliers and logistics enterprises. This will be done while promoting sustainable development and contributing to Jamaica's economic growth. The main objective of the Logistics Council will be to provide inputs in developing targeted programs and initiatives to help enterprises prepare themselves to participate in the global value chain, to review forward-looking initiatives, to assist MSMEs to implement business transformation improvements. This will enable them to emerge stronger and take advantage of the logistics-centered economy, to work outside and alongside government and policymakers and regulators to provide strategic advice and insights that improve the safety, efficiency, and sustainability of the sector, and to strengthen enterprise-level access to the global value and supply chain, while improving the industry's overall performance. And I thought I heard the Minister of Tourism recognizing that and asking that the supply issues need focus. These are the solutions, Minister. To further enhance Jamaica's competitiveness, resilience, and attractiveness as a logistic hub, emphasis must be placed on enhancing its connectivity to the major markets and countries in the world. Already, a major asset in Jamaica becoming the gateway to the Americas is the connection of the Port of Kingston to over 190 different ports around the world, providing markets links to major economies in North, South, and Central America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. Further, Madam Speaker, Jamaica's reputation as a major transshipment hub is already well established and provides a platform to develop the logistics capabilities and to gain a reputation as a value-added logistics hub. This can be achieved by developing in the near port and port hinterland facilities, such as regional distribution hubs. Madam Speaker, we will attract large-scale and foreign investment in the build-out of special economic zones, providing a range of industrial, commercial, and logistics activities, such as Tier 1 warehouses, cold storage, fulfillment and distribution services, ship repairs, bunkering, and ship chandlering, among others. Additionally, Madam Speaker, the build-out of SEZs will provide the opportunity for linkages with domestic firms, both large and small, either as a source of import from or export to the zones, with incentives provided for domestic producers of goods and services to export into the zones without paying GCT on such exports. There are a range of benefits for developers and occupants within the zones. Special provisions benefiting MSC businesses are provided for the SEZ Act and regulations to ensure integration of small and medium-sized businesses into zone activities and, by extension, into global markets. It is important, Madam Speaker, that regardless of size, each business planning to sell its services or goods into the zone accepts the high standards of quality and price competitiveness which the purchasers will demand as a condition of doing business in the zones. For those businesses conducting operations in the zone and wishing to sell into the domestic market, duty is normally imposed unless otherwise exempted. An additional advantage of Jamaica becoming a logistic hub is a network of subsea cables providing enhanced connectivity to other Caribbean islands and beyond to the rest of the world. These physical assets, in turn, provide the backbone to a robust telecommunication, information and communication and ICT network, essential to supplying the logistics and supply chain operations globally. Similarly, Jamaica's logistics capabilities and connectedness of value to local and global logistics operators will be greatly enhanced by the build-out of its multimodal capacity in rail, barge, roads, and air travel or cargo operations. Madam Speaker, to further improve Jamaica's connectivity and logistics infrastructure, the PNP government will develop the Vernon Field Aerotropolis project, championed by former Minister Mike Henry. This is complementary infrastructure, Madam Speaker, as the Vernon Field project will enhance Jamaica's capability to engage in long-haul cargo movement as well as passenger travel to increase Jamaica and the Caribbean region's tourism capacity. It further enhances what I've heard the tourism minister call a resilient tourism industry. This is critical. Madam Speaker, our two major airports are near the sea and are vulnerable to sea level rise against the backdrop of climate change. The Mid-Island location proposed for development of the much talked about Vernon Field Airport provides the flexibility and resilience needed in a trading hub to provide reliability and to mitigate investors' risks. These improvements will inspire companies across the logistic chain to to establish operations in Jamaica, as they can rely on frequent and dependable connectivity to reach global markets rapidly. Our local supply chains and e-commerce, last-mile delivery capabilities in parcel, food, clothing, and other business and consumer products will be positively affected. What then are the key policy mix to achieving this vision? Realizing the logistics-centered economy, Madam Speaker, requires us to build on Jamaica's strategic location by developing Tier 1 physical and digital infrastructure, as well as an entrepreneurial public sector that is efficient, motivated, and fairly treated. In addition, the blueprint established in the Global Logistic Hub Initiative Master Plan and Market Analysis must be dusted off and its core recommendations implemented. Among the recommendations is the need for a correct mix of policies and institutions to achieve the desired outcomes, which must now be adjusted to take account of the lessons learned during the pandemic. Madam Speaker, the following mix of policies will be pursued in the next PNP administration. 1, a strengthened trade policy to reflect Jamaica's trade offensive capabilities and interest in successfully building and operating the trade and logistics hub. This will require a network of trade agreements which goes beyond the preferential or asymmetrical agreements currently being pursued by CARICOM. These new agreements will build on the Economic Partnership Agreement with Europe and the Brexit-induced agreement with the United Kingdom to advance services trade, improve market access and rules of origin issues, as well as enhanced interest in participating in the global supply and value chains with strengthened logistics services capabilities. The second of these policies, Madam Speaker, is a revised industrial policy, providing appropriate incentives for tech startups in providing the computing and data analytics capabilities to support investment in Industry 4.0 technologies, such as IoT, Internet of Things, AI, and machine learning, critical in driving advanced manufacturing capabilities, and the design of a flexible and resilient digital supply chains. The industrial policy, Madam Speaker, will take account of the proposed new industrial policy for CARICOM, which must address the structural issues involving energy security, and competitively priced energy. Third, Madam Speaker, is a modern logistic policy to give support to the build-out of the Global Logistic Hub in identifying the critical institutional arrangements as well as infrastructural and policy supports necessary to underpin a multidisciplinary and multi-year approach to a public-private partnership effort. This effort, Madam Speaker, must secure the participation of women, youths, and differently enabled persons to address issues of equity, inclusivity, and sustainability in this transformational effort. Madam Speaker, to transform the economy, we must increase our focus on digital technologies to create tech-enabled solutions to a wide range of issues affecting the economy and society. The government must play a lead role in the embrace of these technologies and leapfrogging our current state of adoption and adaptation of future-facing technologies, which is needed to catalyze innovation and growth across all domains, including in the public sector. To succeed in these, Madam Speaker, education and training in Jamaica must be transformed through a multi-stakeholder effort requiring all able hands and creative minds coming to the fore to transform the current systems. The needs of industry generally and the Global Logistics Hub must be prioritized for there to be alignment on our efforts to develop and grow the economy, thereby providing good-paying jobs, which in turn generate the revenues for government, businesses and families to sustain a multi-year commitment of resources to achieve the goals set for education and training institutions at all levels. In this effort, Madam Speaker, we are well advised to seek the cooperation of our development partners, such as the Government of Singapore, which has succeeded in building and operating a logistics-centered economy. In doing so, Singapore has set the standards for education and training against which our efforts at achieving a successful logistic hub in the Caribbean and Americas will be judged. Additionally, our trust NSTA must succeed in overcoming its current challenges in providing the trained and certified skills needed by the increased investment in the logistics-centered economy and the urgent needs of allied industries. By focusing on these areas, we aim to enhance Jamaica's global competitiveness, create new job opportunities, improve our international standing, and position Jamaica as a premier global logistic gateway, interconnecting the Americas with the rest of the world. Madam Speaker, a defined role for our universities in Jamaica and throughout the region must be articulated in this drive to build the current and future leaders of the logistic-powered regional economy. Jamaica's role as a global trade and logistic hub will necessitate the development of complementary infrastructures if development and growth throughout the region is to be realized and sustained. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, Jamaica is in a rare moment when the challenges of achieving high levels of growth and development in our economy and our people intersects with a broad consensus on building a logistic hub in Jamaica to take advantage of our geostrategic location in the Caribbean and the Americas. The alignment of government, the opposition, and the private sector on the logistics-centered economy is itself a rare moment, especially coming after 10 years, after a 10-year debate. The debate was settled largely due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which disrupted the global supply chain and unleashed 2 years of deaths, serious illnesses, unavailability, shortages, and delay of critical goods and services, resulting in a global inflation spiral. The hopefulness of a 16-year-old boy or girl growing up in Jamaica in this period cannot be undermined by an absence of leadership at this very moment of our opportunity. The central importance of trust in our government by the public sector workers, as well as the fact of growing disaffection of the electorate in our political process, increases the premium of consensus among the government, opposition, and the private sector in creating a logistics-centered economy. Madam Speaker, we need to keep alive the hopes and aspirations of that young boy from the inner city and the girl from rural Jamaica who are about to graduate from high school or university. We must instill confidence for a better future for them in Jamaica. The government's failure, therefore, to keep its promise to public sector workers that none would be worse off at the end of the compensation review process, coupled with the treatment of senior public sector workers in the portfolio ministries and agencies, also serve to undermine trust in government and immediately threatens our ability to implement our strategic objectives around which there is consensus. The government must repair this breach of trust among public sector workers. If not, the next PNP administration pledges to fix the inequities arising from this unsettled process. Otherwise, we would have missed an opportunity to create a public sector fit for the challenges of this age and our time. This hopeful moment for the young Jamaican boy and girl is fueled by the fact that we are now embarked on a constitutional reform process to achieve full sovereignty over our affairs after a long and tortuous journey. This opportunity cannot be frittered away. We must unleash the collective energies and creativity of our people and reignite hope and trust in government and in its processes. With the right mix of policies and the level of investments needed in our human resource capacity, our physical and digital infrastructure, Jamaica can become a hub of economic activity and a major contributor to building resilience in the global supply chain network, benefiting our young men and women by creating a different future of opportunities in an economy that is not merely surviving, but is thriving. Time comes for innovative, creative, honest and trustworthy leadership in government to redirect Jamaica's current path to achieve an inclusive and sustainable economic growth and develop making Jamaica nice for all. God bless Jamaica and our people. Thank you, Madam Speaker.